In a world drowning in pollution and apathy, 30,000 ordinary citizens stood tall and did the extraordinary. They didn't wait for foreign aid or government orders. In just 1 week, they transformed their streets, towns, and villages with their bare hands. This is a story of dignity, of discipline, of what Africa, and the world, can become when the people reclaim their power. It began with something deceptively simple, a voice, not a president's decree, not a law passed in a parliament, but a voice from within the people. A call that did not demand but awakened, a call that asked if not us, then who. One voice turned into hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. This was not a call to arms, this was a call to duty. Not to fight a foreign invader, but to confront the silent enemy that had invaded their streets. Garbage, neglect, decay. The enemy was not outside. It was in every overflowing gutter, every pile of trash baking under the sun. And that was the moment when the people decided enough was enough. No one waited for a command. No one demanded compensation. The voice of the nation rose from the dust and called its sons and daughters to action. It was not a project. It was not a campaign. It was something far greater. It was a moment of spiritual awakening, a realization that the land you live on reflects the soul you carry, and that soul had been buried for too long beneath layers of excuses, dependency, and indifference. The first step was not logistical, it was moral, and that is where the revolution truly began. Mothers tied headscarves and picked up brooms. Young men who once wandered jobless in markets now carried shovels with pride. Elders sat at corners and directed teams, not out of authority, but wisdom. The whole nation seemed to breathe in a new rhythm, a rhythm not of chaos, but of collective movement. It didn't matter whether you lived in a concrete house or a mud hut, whether you were educated or not, whether you were rich or poor. The call erased those lines. For 1 week, there were no spectators. There were only citizens. Each one picked up something: tools, trash, ideas, courage. Because the real waste was not just physical garbage, it was mental, emotional, spiritual, the kind that makes a person believe it's not my job. That is what was being swept away more than anything. Children followed their parents, not because they were told to, but because they saw a nation rising. They saw dignity in action, and children do not follow words, they follow example. In that week, they learned what textbooks don't teach, that greatness is not inherited. It is built broom by broom, brick by brick, moment by moment. And when you teach a child that discipline is strength, that order is beauty, and that service is honor, you don't just clean a street, you clean a generation. In villages, town squares, and dusty neighborhoods, something electric pulsed through the people. It was as if the act of cleaning the land was also cleansing their minds. You could hear the laughter, the instructions, the songs. Some played drums, others sang freedom songs, not about colonialism, but about self-liberation. That week, the people were not waiting for help. They were helping themselves. And in doing so, they were teaching a lesson that would echo across borders. When citizens own their country, nothing is impossible. This was not a movement born from luxury. It was born from necessity. Because when you live with trash long enough, you begin to believe you are trash. That's what makes this story remarkable. Not that it happened, but who made it happen. These weren't trained sanitation experts. These were farmers, mothers, youths without jobs, mechanics, students, people whose only qualification was love for their land. In a continent where the narrative is often that the people are waiting for handouts, this was a slap in the face to that lie. 30,000 people didn't ask for resources. They used what they had. They didn't wait for leadership. They became the leadership. That's what scared those watching from a distance. Because a people who can organize themselves to clean a country are the same people who can organize to build it, defend it, and govern it. They cannot be easily controlled. They are awake now, and once people are awake, you cannot put them back to sleep with lies. The story of how 30,000 citizens answered a simple call is not about sanitation. It's about sovereignty, about responsibility, about dignity reclaimed with bare hands and honest sweat. The world should take notice, but more importantly, we should remember. We should remember that a nation is not made by elections. It is made by effort, not by policies written in books, but by actions written on the ground. That first voice, the one that called out to the people, it may never be known by name. But it doesn't matter, because the movement was never about one leader, it was about all of them. It was about each man, each woman who looked around and said, "I will be the change, I will be the broom, I will be the hope." And that, my friends, is the birth of a new kind of nation. One that does not wait to be told what to do. One that knows. The power has always been in its own hands. What the world saw during those 7 days was not a frenzy. It was not a chaotic rush of people grabbing tools and scrambling for attention. It was structure, it was precision, it was dignity in motion. From the outside, it might have looked spontaneous, but within the heart of the movement was something far deeper, discipline, discipline that no military could enforce, no law could dictate, no money could buy. This was the kind of discipline that only comes from within, the kind that is born when people are no longer content to live below their potential. There were no riot shields, no tear gas, no riot police marching down the streets. Instead, there were young men and women waking up at dawn, forming teams, and heading to designated areas with clear direction. Volunteers had drawn maps, made checklists, assigned zones. In every district, someone had stepped up as coordinator, not because they were elected, but because leadership had become a shared duty. The energy wasn't just physical, it was mental. A spirit of order guided every move. What made it so remarkable was that no one had to be told twice. There was no chasing people down, no reminding, because when a people truly believe in a cause, they don't need management, they manage themselves. And that's what happened. Youth who once loitered on street corners became supervisors, mothers became organizers, elders offered wisdom and memory, reminding the youth that long ago, Africa was built on self-reliance, not dependency. That reminder sparked something, a return to roots, a return to pride. No one was sitting on the sidelines complaining about what others were doing. They were too busy doing, they were too focused on impact. And in that focus, you could feel something rare respect, not just for each other, but for the task itself. Cleaning the streets was not seen as dirty work. It was noble work, sacred work. There was no shame in it. People wore their sweat like medals. They didn't hide their hands covered in mud. They held them up as proof. I served. I contributed. In many nations, the idea of volunteerism is often viewed with suspicion. People ask, "Why are you doing this? What are you getting in return?" But not here, not in this movement. No one needed a paycheck. The reward was immediate and internal. A street cleared of garbage. A child playing on clean ground. A community breathing fresh air for the first time in years. That was payment enough. That was wealth. That was freedom. What was even more inspiring was how disagreements were handled. Naturally, with thousands of people involved, there were moments of tension. But unlike political rallies where division brews and tempers explode, here, the commitment to the mission was stronger than the ego. Disagreements were met with patience, with calm, with focus. "We are not here to argue." One organizer said, "We are here to clean. Let's finish that and then talk." And just like that, the work continued. Because everyone knew that the moment you let anger take over, the mission dies. This discipline extended beyond the work sites. Social media groups were formed, not to spread gossip, but to coordinate. Updates were sent not to go viral, but to inform. People shared progress, encouraged others, and tracked the zones that still needed attention. Photos were posted not for vanity, but as proof of change. The digital space mirrored the ground reality, focused, determined, and united. Local businesses pitched in. Shopkeepers provided water and snacks to workers. Mechanics fixed broken carts and wheelbarrows. Tailors sewed flags and headbands to give volunteers a sense of unity. No one was left out. Even those who couldn't physically join found ways to contribute. The elderly prayed and shared stories of past movements. Children drew signs and helped carry light loads. Everyone found their place not through command, but through conviction. This discipline was not about control. It was about alignment. Every man and woman aligned with a single vision, a cleaner, prouder nation. That alignment made things move without force. There was no boss, no central planner micromanaging the day. Yet somehow, everything ran like a well-oiled machine. Why? Because when people believe in something deeply, they govern themselves better than any authority can. And here's the truth that frightened those who observed from a distance. A people who can self-organize are a people who can self-govern. They don't need to be ruled. They need to be respected. They don't need lectures. They need the space to rise. Because the moment discipline becomes cultural rather than enforced, progress becomes permanent. The days of telling Africa that it must be policed into order are over. This movement proved that discipline is already within us. It simply needed purpose, and now that purpose has been awakened, it cannot be put back to sleep. What the people of this nation demonstrated in 7 days was that we do not need to be reminded of our duty. We have always known it. What we needed was the chance to own it again, and in doing so they reminded the world, and themselves, that when Africa moves with discipline, she is not just beautiful, she is unstoppable. In just 7 days, something incredible happened. Roads that were once buried under trash became visible again. Markets that were once avoided because of the stench now welcomed people with open paths and clean surroundings. Parks once abandoned were reclaimed by laughter. Rivers that were clogged with plastic and filth began to flow again, but the transformation wasn't only physical. Yes, the nation's face was washed clean, but so was something much deeper, the collective self-image of the people. It was a rebirth, a cleansing of the mind as much as of the streets. The people didn't just see their country differently, they saw themselves differently. As each piece of litter was picked up, it was as if a layer of hopelessness was being peeled away. The people realized that they had accepted filth not because they liked it, but because they had been conditioned to believe that nothing could change, that someone else had to fix it, that they were too poor, too small, too powerless. But in the act of taking action, through hands, sweat, and community, they proved those old lies wrong, and in that proof, a new sense of identity was born. It was not just about having clean roads. It was about standing tall while walking them. It was not just about open drains. It was about open eyes, seeing clearly what they were capable of when they united. The people began to talk differently, smile differently. Conversations shifted from complaints to possibilities. Children asked questions not about when help would come, but about what they could do next. This was no small change. This was the ignition of a cultural shift. What had been missing for so long was not funding. It was not technology. It was faith, faith in self, faith in one another, faith in the idea that their land could be beautiful again, not someday but now, not if someone came to fix it, but if they chose to fix it. That faith was restored in real time, with every broomstroke, every bag of trash, every street corner reborn. Even the way people dressed began to shift during that week. Volunteers wore similar colors. Bandanas, gloves, uniforms created not by government decree, but by community spirit. There was pride in the appearance of service. There was pride in being associated with cleanliness. No one mocked the cleaners. They admired them, they celebrated them. For the first time in a long time, those who served the community were not invisible. They were heroes, and this change was contagious. In neighborhoods where participation was low, residents soon felt the pressure not from law enforcement, but from dignity itself. No one wanted to be left behind in a rising nation. No one wanted to be the block that stayed dirty. The movement, though rooted in compassion, carried with it an unspoken challenge: rise, or be seen as choosing to remain below. And that gentle challenge moved even the laziest to stand up. Foreigners watching the footage were stunned. "Where are the trucks?" they asked. "Where is the government money? Who's coordinating all this?" They didn't understand that the answer was in front of them, the people themselves. That was the beauty of it. It was grassroots power in its purest form. People driven not by salary or politics, but by purpose. And perhaps the most powerful transformation of all was what happened in the minds of the youth. For too long, they had been told that their future lay in escape, get out of the country, go abroad, find opportunity elsewhere. But for once, they saw that building their country could be even more fulfilling than leaving it. They saw that dignity was not in flight, but in foundation, in construction, in creation. They weren't just picking up garbage. They were picking up the pieces of a dream that had been broken for too long. There is something life-changing about cleaning something with your own hands, about watching a place you've walked your whole life be transformed by your own effort. It changes how you think. It changes what you believe you deserve. When you walk a clean street, one that you helped clean, you protect it differently. You don't throw trash. You don't ignore damage. You become a guardian, not just a passerby. That's what happened on a national scale. Every clean street became a silent testimony. We are capable. We are disciplined. We are worthy. Every park restored was more than green space. It was a declaration that beauty belongs to everyone, not just to the rich. Every canal cleared was a reminder that our environment reflects our soul, and that a clean nation is a confident nation. By the end of the 7 days, the transformation was visible to all, but the most important changes were invisible, etched deep into the spirit of the people. They no longer waited for change, they became it. They no longer believed that transformation was for others, they owned it. The nation didn't just become cleaner, it became alive, awake, determined. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new mindset, a mindset that says, we are not waiting, we are building, we are not begging, we are becoming. And all of it started with one simple, powerful act, people choosing to clean their land, and in doing so, rediscovering who they really are. What the world witnessed during those 7 days was not just an environmental effort, it was a declaration. A bold, thunderous, unapologetic message sent not just to neighboring countries, but to the world's elite, to the former colonizers, to the so-called donors, to those who look at Africa and see only problems. We will rise by our own hands. This was not a government project funded by a foreign grant. It was not a campaign designed to impress Western eyes. It was not a project born from international conferences. It was something far more powerful, citizens, united by purpose, lifting their nation with nothing but their own sweat, willpower, and love for their land. That message is stronger than any speech, stronger than any official statement at the UN. Because it is backed by action, it's real. It is living proof that African nations do not need to beg for progress. They do not need to plead for recognition. They do not need to follow anyone else's model. The people have the power. The people have the tools. The people have the fire. All they needed was to believe it again, and now they do. This message, though silent in words, echoed across the continent like a drumbeat. To other African nations it said, your people are not lazy. Your youth are not lost. Your land is not cursed. The lie that Africa needs saving, again and again, has been shattered. What Africa needs is space to move, freedom to lead, and belief in her own strength. This movement reminded us that we are not children of charity. We are children of destiny. When 30,000 people stood up to clean their country, they reclaimed something bigger than roads and rivers. They reclaimed their narrative. For too long, the world has talked about Africa instead of to her. They have written reports, held summits, and launched development programs that ignore the very heartbeat of the continent, its people. This movement said, you cannot write our story for us anymore. We are holding the pen now, and no amount of aid can match what self-discipline can build. No number of projects can replace what national pride can ignite. What those citizens did in 7 days with zero outside funding is something many wealthy nations could not do with millions. Why? Because money cannot replace purpose. Technology cannot replace unity. And no imported solution can ever match the power of a people who believe in themselves. The world expected Africa to remain dependent. That's why this movement was so disruptive. It showed a different path. A path where Africans don't just participate in change, they own it. Where they don't just follow policies written abroad, They create their own vision, rooted in their own soil, values, and history, where they stop asking to be included at the table and instead build their own. And this is just the beginning, because once people realize they can clean their own nation, they begin to ask, what else can we do? Can we build our own roads? Can we run our own schools? Can we defend our own borders? Can we grow our own food, power our own towns, write our own laws, heal our own wounds? The answer becomes clear, yes, 1,000 times yes, because the only thing we were ever missing was belief, and now that belief has been born. This belief will not be silenced. It will not be buried under new forms of modern colonialism. It will not be bought with loans or distractions. It has tasted action. It has seen its own reflection, not in shame, but in pride. The broom has become a symbol of revolution, not because it is glamorous, but because it is honest, because it reminds us that the greatest work is not done in conference rooms or foreign embassies, but in the streets, by the people, with their hands in the soil of their homeland. To the rest of the world, the message is this: Africa is rising, not because you allowed it, not because you sponsored it, but because her people have chosen to rise. Do not be surprised when you see African cities run with excellence. When you see African villages powered by their own energy, organized by their own youth. Do not be shocked when Africans no longer wait at your borders to escape, but instead open their own gates to innovation, progress, and peace. This is the era of self-liberation, and liberation is not just about flags and independence days. It's about ownership of land, of labor, of ideas. And when 30,000 citizens took ownership of their streets, they sent a clear signal: we do not belong to anyone. We are not your project, we are not your statistic, we are not your charity case. We are a people of power, and we have remembered it. This awakening will spread, it will inspire, it will be challenged, but it will not die. Because once a people taste the dignity of doing for themselves, they will never again settle for being done for. They will rise again and again. And that is what the world must prepare for, not an Africa begging to be included, but an Africa standing tall and saying, we are here. We are ready, and we will rise, not with your help, but with our own hands.